frank, and informative discussion. Only on Soufriere FM, your community radio station.
88.5 Soufriere FM. It's now 22 minutes after the hour of 10 a.m. It's Soufriere and Lucia. And of course, the Eastern Caribbean, a special good morning. It's great to be back. Let me welcome my first guest, Inspector Kimroy Rene. It's a pleasure to have you here. Let me reach out to our listeners as well. Good morning. Welcome to today's edition of House Guests. First and foremost, let me commend all the students on the reopening of school. We know school is there for, education is the key to success. And with that being said, we want to encourage those of you who are back at school to take your instructions very serious. Ensure that you listen to your educators. And we also want to encourage you to stay away from trouble, do not be distracted. Hence why I saw it fitting actually to have the inspector here with me today. What I saw on Monday as well was a few of the police officers actually doing some patrols, ensuring that everything is at bay with the teachers, with the students at the various institutions. Good morning once again to you, sir. Thank you for gracing us here with your presence.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Cabrina.
For persons who are not aware, this is where let's break the ice a little. Tell me who you are, or tell the listening audience who is Mr. Rene.
Well, who is Mr. Rene? I am a Soufrierian by birth, so I am no stranger to Soufriere. Was born and raised at Etangs, Soufriere. Went to the Etangs Combined and from the Soufriere Comprehensive Secondary School. Upon graduation, I first worked with then Barclays Bank. So, I did do a stint within the community where I met quite a bit of the people within the Soufriere environs. And from there in 1999, I got enlisted into the RSLPF and has been there since. So I am an inspector of police at this time, 23 years service, have worked in a number of department stations, units across the island, with majority of my time spent in the north of the island. However, fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, but I would say fortunately, I was transferred to the Soufriere Choiseul division, where on the 26th of June this year. So I am fairly new from a police perspective to Soufriere, but as a resident, I've lived there my entire life.
Thank you so much for that. What inspired you to become a police officer?
Well, policing, for me, law enforcement in particular has always been a passion of mine. And the two areas I really showed a high level of interest were the police and the custom and excise department. And for me, it all has to do with my upbringing. My parents were very strict persons. They always maintained that we lived decent, law-abiding lives. They did not accept any kind of, bad behavior or misbehavior. And for me, from birth, it was instilled, in me that, hey, you need to, one, live by the rules and the laws, and then contribute towards a positive, society. I could give you, a quick, just a quick joke, just to show you how strict my parents were growing up. Living in the countryside, Etangs, there is quite a bit of farming being done there. And my elder siblings at one point, young boys doing, you're roaming, passed through somebody's garden, and they saw some nice bell peppers and picked one or two and brought them home. And as soon as they got home, my mom asked them, "Where did you get that?" They said, "Well, we got it in the garden up Malwee. That's an area high up my home." And then my mom said, "Go go take it right back and stick it on the plant, because she's not going to accept, anybody bringing any stolen item or any item that does not belong to them at our house. So they had to go back and bring it, they couldn't stick it back, but they had to return it. It just shows you the kind of standard my mom set, for us growing up. So all that contributed towards my, wanting to be into law enforcement.
Definitely. Can you just imagine if that culture existed? A lot of what we see in terms of the youth, the decay of morals, it will be a thing of the past.
Totally agree. Totally. I think it is important that the parents, groom the children to the direction they want them to live. And too often I see our children are not raised by the parents, not raised by the society, but raised by television and video games and all kind of other means of social media. And for me, this has created this level of imbalance we see in our society when you look at, crime and criminality among the youth, I would say.
Which is true, and it's sad. And it leaves me to ask you, what is expected with the reopening of school? I did say earlier on where we saw the police did some patrols at the various institutions as well. Maybe you can share your sentiments with me.
Yes, well, one of the strategic plan of the RSLPF has always been one of community policing. And if you have the opportunity to review the mission and vision of the RSLPF, it speaks about providing a professional police service in partnership with the community and to make it a safer environment for everyone. So our core values really speaks of working with the community. And our community is not only the adults, but also the young people who are our students, who are our future. And because of that, the police force saw the importance of that and invested in what we call the community relation branch, where we go out in the communities and especially targeting the schools, an educational institution, to one, because we understand that there are quite a bit of situations that require a law enforcement intervention at the schools, but not a, rigid kind of response like you would do with, an adult, but where you have to deal with sensitive situations, young persons. So we have persons who are specifically trained in that area to, on a daily basis, interact with the students, interact with the educators. One profile who are the persons that we believe would need some level of intervention. We also use that as a way of marketing our police force, because children are always excited when they see a police officer. So whereas you would have a community relation officer, CRB officer, we call them, visiting, but they would always work with one of our regular officers, in the uniform and, the firearm and that kind of thing, to really see how we could, because we need to recruit early. We need to identify persons. We need to bring that culture. The police is not your enemy from early. We need to bring it from that tender age. So it is a way of marketing ourselves to the young person so that when they grow up, they could say, yes, I want to be a police officer, because it's something that excites them. It's something that, there is standard, there is, excitement about.
I fully agree with this. Permit me to actually ask you, there have been incidents where even with the patrolling, we would get a few children actually coming to school with weapons and those sort of thing. How is it being dealt with? I know most of the times the minors, they basically cannot be charged or arrested. Again, you did mention various interventions, if it's by way of counseling. How do you actually deal with such trouble kids, if I would say?
I wouldn't say that they cannot be charged, because the Children and Young Person Act speaks of the different, persons and the age range from which a person is criminally liable, right? So the person can be charged, but sometimes, sometimes there need to be an intervention before you go that rigid, process. So, and we've seen it. We've seen that criminal elements would try to profit on the young, impressionable minds, to begin to recruit them the same way we the police try to recruit from our schools. The gang members and the criminal elements would try to identify those young persons who they believe they can recruit, because at a tender age, their minds are still impressionable. They're still influenced by what they see, not being able to analyze completely what they're getting into. So when we encounter those situations, there must be an intervention. And like I said, we have the community relation branch of the RSLPF, which works closely with the probation parole department, where you have social workers, persons who are trained to be able to sit down and speak and try to get into the minds of those young impressionable persons, and try to redirect the focus and energy in a positive one instead of the negative one. So those are the short-term remedies, but if we realize it's a more in-depth problem, then those students now would be taken away from the environment, where, because sometimes the environment contributes towards them being the way they are. So they would be taken away from that. So then they would be placed in specific institution like the Boys Training Center, where a process of trying to rehabilitate them into, the proper way of doing things, is trying to inculcate in them. So you have professionals there; they would be exposed to certain skills training, certain interpersonal skill training that would help them to reintegrate into society. And I could tell you, some of those programs have resulted in persons who initially were trouble youths to being professionals who eventually went on to be, good citizens. I could recall a situation where we actually have a serving police officer who, in his tender years, went to the Boys Training Center, but then he realized that, hey, he wants to, live a good, clean life, and then change his ways because the intervention worked at the time. Sometimes it may not work for everybody, but I could tell you from my observation, quite a bit of persons are able to be, reintegrated properly into our society.
Thank you so much for that. Another thing we actually see happening, and if you ask me, persons would basically say, it is my vehicle, I am pleased to do whatever. But there are charges to loud music, and we see a lot of that in and around the town circuit as well.
Yes. The Criminal Code Section 550 speaks clearly on permission to play loudspeakers, and it speaks not just loudspeakers but also amplified music, and that is an offense. And what I have realized is the trend that persons, place those huge speakers, on top of the vehicles, and they believe they could pull up anywhere and pull up a session. The police have not yet begun enforcing Section 550 of the Criminal Code, which speaks of loudspeakers, a musical instrument in public place. But for you to play a loudspeaker, even the authorized business places, the restaurants, and for them to play loud music, they need to apply for the relevant permits from the Office of the Commissioner of Police, right, to grant them that permission. So those persons who are driving around with those loudspeakers and believe it's, it's my vehicle and I am at liberty to play my music, in my vehicle, you are playing a loudspeaker and you are in violation of the criminal code. And we must understand the difference between the criminal code and the traffic act. A traffic offense is not considered a criminal offense, so it's a traffic violation, where you will not get a criminal record from getting a traffic ticket. So it will not be on a record. So you will have a clean certificate of character, even if you issued a ticket, or you driving your vehicle excess speeding, you don't have the relevant lights, you don't have the stickers. Those are traffic violations, which are not criminal offense. But the criminal code is a criminal offense, which comes with penalties that include incarceration. Right, so you're not committing a traffic violation when you are playing those loud music. You are committing a criminal act, under the criminal code, because our criminal code cover all our serious offense like murders, burglaries, grievous harm, wounding. It's the relationship that captures all those offenses, and it was drive really our policing efforts in terms of enforcement. So it just shows you the severity of the offense that has been committed by those persons with those loudspeakers. And I could tell you it's a discussion that the police is having presently in terms of how we're going to deal with that, well, our approach to that, those loudspeakers. And soon those vehicles are going to be stopped, and the criminal code gives the power to confiscate this loudspeaker if the person does not have the relevant supporting permits to engage in playing loud music.
Well, I'm very happy you actually shed some light on that, officer, and I would love for the update sooner or later so the audience themselves can actually adhere. Because too often we think it's always okay to do any and everything and not obeying protocols or guidelines. The other issue we see as well is in terms of the issuance of permits as well, especially if persons decide to put an activity together where there are mass crowds involved.
Well, we must also always factor, there must always be a risk assessment done when any event, any mass crowd event is held. And when there is a risk assessment done, then you would understand, okay, what measures do we put in place to, one, minimize the risk, and two, what should we done in case, an incident happens, how our response mechanism. So, and this is why the mass crowd event policy was developed, really to ensure that there is a proactive approach to any response to any incident. We must understand that all the various stakeholders, departments involved, including the police, the fire service, operate with limited resources. What you do not want is a situation where you overburden your system and that you are not able to adequately respond to an incident. So take, for example, you have a nightclub where multiple nightclubs operating in one certain jurisdiction, and then you have a fire, for example, or you have a mass shooting. Do we have the adequate resource? And so that is the idea behind setting a policy. For one, we would evaluate, we do the risk assessment, look at how many events do we have? Can we cover all those events? Do we have the resource to provide the relevant support? Security of personnel is always paramount. So because of that, the protocol have been placed, and that persons must apply for a permit to host the mass crowd event. Also, you have a situation where ECHO is an active supporter of the intellectual properties of the artists, and they believe that if the intellectual property is going to be utilized to generate a revenue, there should be some compensation towards the owner of this intellectual property. So the songwriters, the producers, they should themselves benefit. So you need to get your ECHO permit, one, so that the royalties are paid to those persons. You need to contact NEMO, because NEMO is our national emergency organization in case there is any mass casualty event, that they are aware that they have access to all the stakeholders, all the tentacles to say, hey, we had this major incident. We need you to come in urgently. We need to be able to put a plan in place to our response plan. We need to, so they themselves have to be aware of it and approve it. The police, the fire service must be aware, because you need ambulance service. In case of a fire, they would know where to go to, right? So take, for example, there is an event at some place where you don't inform the fire service where exactly did a beach bash in some remote area, and then a call comes, we have a major incident, we have a drowning, we have something, and then the ambulance don't know where to go because they never planned for that. But if they have prior knowledge, they could do their research and say, okay, I know where Sabwisha is, I know where Shasne is, and then they could provide the expeditious response that is needed for such events. The police now itself has to be aware, because one, we have to respond to those calls that come in on a daily basis. The police have to do its patrols, have to respond to call. We have domestic violence, we have burglaries, we have those incidents to respond to. And then now you have a major mass crowd event where they would need to have some level of security. We need to police that, the presence of the police. One of our first activities, not just a reaction to an incident, but a proactive approach where our presence alone should act as a deterrent to somebody committing a crime. And that is the purpose of the police, really, to not just respond, but to be proactive in preventing. We always prefer the prevention aspect than the response aspect, because the sad thing is when you respond, it has already happened, and you can't control. You have little control at that point compared to, hey, if you prevent it, then you don't have to deal with all the headaches that comes with the response aspect. So because of that, and that is why the police is the last agency to sign off on any loudspeaker permit, any approval, because we need to make sure that you have met all the other requirements. You bring that to the police and say, I have met all those, your liquor license also, because you must have permission to sell alcohol wherever you are operating. Because again, we need to understand that. People need to understand that, hey, you can't sell alcohol to a minor, so there must be enforcement of that. So you get all those documents, and then now you apply to the police, informing them that, okay, I am hosting this event. I have gotten the relevant approval from all those other agencies I have identified. And there are the copies. I am asking for your permission now because the criminal code gives the police force the permission to grant the permit for the loudspeaker. So you could organize all your big events, and if the police say, well, we ain't giving you the permit, and that will be based not just on malice, but more on a risk assessment aspect. Have you met the criteria? Do we believe it's safe enough for the people who will be attending those events? Is the police adequately positioned to be able to respond effectively and efficiently in a timely manner? All those things must be factored before the approval is given. So it's not a situation where we decide should we or should not. No, we assess, evaluate, and decide.
Thanks for the clarification. And of course, in the past, we've seen those incidents actually, and it hasn't been received too well by the public. But I think based on what you did say, it's a matter of the relevant authorities working hand in glove.
Yes.
For a smooth transition, that is.
Definitely.
This is where I'm going to ask, because it has been a problem with the loitering on the Soufriere waterfront. Now that your presence is in Soufriere, I know Choiseul, but let's speak to Soufriere. How has it been curbed?
For me, what my observation is quite a few young persons, and the criminal code again makes loitering, criminal offense. So the reality is the police can arrest you if they observe that you are loitering. But we try to avoid that sometimes because one, you would understand the challenge of always having to deal with a large number of persons in your custody. But I think effective policing patrols and effective police presence is a major contributor towards the reduction. And from my time here, one of the things I have told my officers, one of my vision for Soufriere is that we're going to have a robust, energetic, energized policing presence in Soufriere, where we don't wait for the cause to come to us. I don't think the police should ever wait. We have to make our presence felt, right? And I think criminals profit on the opportunity when they feel like they don't feel the presence of the police. Okay, I could do it and get away with it. And for me, we must make our presence felt. We must make the criminals think twice. Should I take the chance? Will I get away? Because they know that the energy that is within the police service in Soufriere is one that is robust, aggressive. Aggressive in not that you abuse your authority, but aggressive at your response time, the attitude towards your work, the passion, commitment. I have heard this statement being made so many times, and every time I hear it, it upsets me. Well, you can't expect the police to be everywhere all the time. And yes, it's true. The police cannot be. But the role of the police is to create the environment where people feel that the police is always watching them.
This is where I'm going to interject to say, how can I put it? I do not, though police presence is of the importance, I think sometimes there are some officers, it's like the more you know, the less you even want to reach out and communicate to them, where they do not make it a comfortable atmosphere for you. Sometimes everybody would have the personality.
Yes.
So you withheld information rather than actually coming forward to present what you know, especially in terms of a crime situation
Yes.
where you would want to pick up that phone and call that police officer, and you're like, no, because the last time I did present information and that person did, reveal my identity. So all those things would have you second guessing what you would have to do.
Yes. I would say I have been fortunate. Prior to my becoming a police officer, I worked in, as a CS, a customer service representative with the bank, where customer service was core to the functions of the bank, where, I could always remember my customer training sessions where the instructor said that your service must be so good that the customer must want to come back to you because they feel like, hey, this guy gave me this, this great service. And when I come, I want Kimroy to take care of my business because Kimroy, the service was exceptional. So that has always stuck with me. And joining the police force, what I've realized that people believe a lot of our police officers don't understand. And I would say the organization has failed to a certain extent, historically, to not inculcate this culture of customer service. The reality is the public is our customers. We are service providers. Our job is to provide a service that at the end of the day, whenever that person feel the need, that they need the assistance, that they will feel comfortable that, hey, I could go to the police and I feel comfortable with, the response I will get. I tell police officers, yes, for example, domestic issues are some of the most, troublesome situations. So, man, woman, you're always in some little fight or some little thing because, the love that's too strong. So they can't, keep it quiet. So every now and then there is, a little tension and the police comes. Irrespective of how many times this person calls you, as a police officer, whether or not you've been there last night or you were there half an hour, your job is to respond because you are on the government's time. You're not on your time. You are providing a service and you have been paid to provide a service to the public. So irrespective that, yes, you go and you speak to the young lady or the young man and said, hey, I would recommend that you leave or you go somewhere else or you'll break up or you'll go to counseling. And then tomorrow you get a call again. Your job is to respond because that day you may choose not to respond. Is the day the situation may escalate and you may have a death on your hand. A situation that could have taken 5 minutes now becomes the loss of life. And you now have to answer the question, why didn't you respond? And your bread now, your salary, your job is on the line because an inquiry is going to be done. Was a report made to the police? Who received the report? Who was informed of the report? What was the response? Why wasn't there an adequate response? And then now recommendations from that inquiry can be made that, hey, Inspector Kimroy Rene did not perform his duty the way that he was supposed to. And as a result, we recommend disciplinary action, be taken against him. And then the disciplinary action can now determine whether we recommend dismissal, demotion, transfer, or whatever action the investigative body feels is necessary. So I always tell my officers that we are service provider. Customer service is key, and this is one of the practice I want to drive at the Soufriere station. That customer service must always be key to our policing efforts. You can be assertive as a police officer without being aggressive. I could walk into a room, or I could engage somebody who's aggressive, being assertive, being confident without having to be aggressive. Because I always tell my officers, the way you carry yourself, the first level of force a police officer presents is how he carries himself. You come there with confidence, you come there with respect, you will get respect in return. If you come like a joker, you'll be treated like a joker. So I always try to encourage this posture of, hey, you must have confidence in yourself, you must respect everybody, right? And then you must be a professional in what you do. That now will transcend to you receiving the same response from the person you are engaging. So, those are the little things that it may not sound important to the police officer, but that could create a world of difference when it comes to making life easier for you as a police officer. You did mention about situations where persons provide the police with information, and it's a sore point that I have heard a lot of times, that the police, the police went back, or the police will give me some information, and the individual came back and say, yes, the officer gave me, and tell me, you gave me the information. Criminals are very smart also. I'm not doubting it does happen, but criminals are very smart, right? And one thing criminals have is time, right? They have time to assess, evaluate, review, right? So, for example, somebody has a firearm. They're in an area, or they did something with the firearm, or they brand or discharge a weapon. And then a call comes to the police. The police goes, respond, execute a search, recovers the weapon. That individual, while in custody, will begin to think, who called the police on me, right? Because somebody called the police, or who told the police, who was there when I did that, or who I should have. And they'll begin to the process of elimination, right? And then now, when they come out, they will test the waters based on the process of elimination. So they'll come to you. Yeah, man, I gave you, you think I know? Fellas tell me it's you, and they're testing you, and to see how you'll respond, right? So sometimes it's not that they know that you were the one, but they're testing the waters because they know somebody did. So now they're trying to find out who. So we must be, aware of that, as to how, the criminals try to get their way, try to get information, try to elicit information from you just by just dropping something out there and seeing how you will respond. Also, from a police perspective, I think information management is one of the areas that we need training in. Sometimes I would say people don't understand how to manage information, in that, not that they intentionally go out to discuss something, but we must understand our society is one that is very small. Everybody knows everybody. So you may have gone to work last night and you dealt with something, right? And then maybe you're out with your partner and say, boy, last night, we responded, we had an operation, and, and you're speaking to somebody who believes is your friend or is an associate of you, and then not realizing that this person has connections, that person has a girlfriend has a brother has a sister, blah, 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 blah. And then, next thing you know, that information goes back to the first person that, So how to manage information is key to our policing operation. Is key to building that confidence in us by the public that, hey, if I give the police information, that they will handle it in a manner that is professional, that they will not disclose any information that would cause the information reaching back to the person that was targeted. So, it is something that we must always preach to our officers, how to handle information. Just don't have useless conversation. The person, in my previous stint where I worked prior, I worked with crime management, and we worked under the principle of need to know. Everything operated on a need to know basis. I could be the inspector and something happens within my unit, and if the powers that be feel there is no need for me to know, I don't need to know, because an assessment would have been done to determine, should I tell Kimroy is Kimroy connected in any way to this, or a cousin to this person, or brother, sister, relative? So because of that, we're trying to avoid, just to prevent him from being in an uncomfortable position. We're not gonna tell him, right? And operations could happen. You're there, but you don't know, because it's need to know. And those are some of the principles of intelligence operations. You operate on it to know. If there's no need for you to know, there's no need for you to know, because sometimes knowing could be too much for you,
Which is true. And I can maybe definitely say we need to maybe apply that in our day-to-day as well. We're narrowing down to our time. I would love to hear your perspective. Gun and gang violence on the island. What can be done? I hear you smile. What can be done? Because most of the times the police, they've been thrown under the bus.
Yes. It is something that, that has really troubled me in terms of our gang situation. And I feel sometimes the police is thrown under the bus. And I feel sometimes the police can do more.
And they deserve it sometimes.
I won't say they deserve it, but I could say sometimes they've been thrown on the bus. But our crime situation is one that cannot just be looked at from an enforcement perspective, not just from an apprehension and detention perspective. And people, I have had quite a bit of an argument from my personal perspective on, some of the policies that we have proposed in terms of how do we deal with gang situations, where all you hear from members of the public or the powers that be is we need stringent, more stricter policies, more stricter punishments in terms of gang and gun violence. And for me, I am counter that. Right? I believe in holistic, intervention systems that don't focus primarily on punitive measures, where you want to jail a young man for life because he was found with a firearm. The bigger question is, if we did implement a system in place where he does not get access to the firearm, wouldn't that be better than having an able-bodied young man who is 17, 18, who is impressionable, and we know what social media and television has done, has inculcated the gun culture in us. So growing up, I watched a lot of Rambo and Chuck Norris, and that's what Hollywood presented to us, the gun culture. So every young man is excited to have a gun. So with the young people now, access to it is the bigger issue than, for me. We need to ask our question: Do we manufacture guns? No, we don't. How do they get here? What are the systems that are falling short in terms of controlling the flow of firearms into our jurisdiction? Are we focusing the energy on recovering those firearms from just the individual who has it, or are we focusing our energy on, as a country, that is, on the gun traffic, the organized crime groups involved in gun trafficking? If you could curtail from that level, access to the 17, 16, 15, 19-year-old will not happen. And then you will not have an able-bodied young man at borderline and tell him, give him 10 years. For what? He's supposed to be contributing towards the economic development of this country, not being incarcerated in an institution that further criminalizes him, right? Because when he goes in there, it's about survival. I could tell you that, because from the time you reach in there, you have those persons who have been there, and then they tell you, choose your side. Are you on that side? Are you on that side? Because they'll call you and tell you, hey, we'll provide you the protection, right? So then, because that's how it is, it's about survival. So then you go with that guy, and then automatically you're branded as a member of that guy crew. So then now you spend your 5 years or your 3 years or 4 years, and you come back out there, and that gang, the rival gang, is saying, oh, mate was with them first crew at Bordelais. So now they get a chance on you. You're not a gang member, but because you, for your own protection, you began to just associate with them, right? You now have to protect yourself from that. And that's where there's the continuation of the the violence that we see happening. I don't prescribe to young people being incarcerated within our facilities, especially our young people. I believe we need to focus on the major players, the organized crime group involved in importation, smuggling, those weapons into our country, the gang leaders who are responsible for recruiting young people. If we could focus our effort on that, then we will have a significant reduction in the gun violence and gang violence that we see, because those young people will not have access to the firearms that they utilize to commit those crimes. So I don't know if this answer, but this is my perspective on it. So I think a holistic approach needs to be taken towards the firearm situation in this country. And it also goes down to not just enforcement, but also, how do we prepare our young people as a society to survive, to be gainfully employed? Do we need to review our education system? Do we need to look at more technical areas? Do we need to present them as more viable than just the academics? Not everybody's an academic, so it's something that needs a deeper conversation. But it's easy just to say the police need to do more. The police need to do more. The police need to do more. We need to recover the firearms. We need to jail the young men. But we need to ask a deeper question, because my analogy, my explanation to what we are facing as a country in terms of the approach that is being proposed and recommended. You have a busted pipe, right? That pipe is dripping water on a daily basis. Instead of getting a plumber to assess and evaluate where the leak is and to repair that leak, all we're doing is coming from mop bucket and a mop and mopping the water on the floor, and we have not fixed the source of the problem. The question is, are we fixing the source of our gun problem in this country? And until we do that, all we'll be doing is mopping up, and incarcerating our young people in this country. And you have a prison filled with young, able men and women, right, who are supposed to be contributing towards the economic growth of this country, but are taken away from the economic growth by the state having to feed them, provide protection and security for them on a daily basis.
Here's what I could say, officer, but thank you so much for your contribution. I think with your input, under your watch, that is, we can definitely see some measures of control. And I know you may have a few programs you wouldn't be love to develop for the community. This is why I would love to hear your vision. What transformation would you like to see in the beautiful town? I think it's the best way to end this interesting conversation. And let me just tell you, this is not the first fall. I'm looking forward to more dialogue with you. I think there is a lot that I have not tapped into yet. There's a lot you maybe need to actually leave with the audience, but we'll do that in another part.
Definitely. Whenever any of my colleagues come to the Soufriere station, I tell them, welcome to paradise. This is the only police station with such a picturesque view, the pitons, the waterfront. And for me, when I go to my management meetings, and when I meet the relevant stakeholders, I tell them, Soufriere is the breadbasket of this country. And what we need to do is to protect our breadbasket. And we need to prevent some of what we've seen happening in the different parts of the island, to prevent it from happening here. And this is why a proactive policing approach must be taken. A holistic policing approach must be taken. And you would have seen in the recent times that there have been quite a bit of aggressive policing presence in terms of the traffic checks, in terms of we'll be doing what we call sweeps. We patrol some of the hotspot area where you see, persons would congregate to engage in criminalities. You conduct searches on those persons. This is some of what from the, I would say, overt methods that we are using. Again, we are joining forces with our partner departments from the South, the Special Services Unit, the Gun Suppression Unit in the South, where we bring them down. So last Friday, you would have seen a major police presence in Soufriere if you were, within the town or by the station. And that was to engage in what we have deemed and rebranded our station as the Southwestern Action and Tactical Team, which is the SWAT team of the West Southwest, where we'll be engaging a lot of house searches, proactive policing. We know that there are guns. We know that there are drugs. We know that there are gang members who would frequent Soufriere to come and lime and to come and chill and to come and hide. So we'll be targeting certain areas. There will be some discomfort to certain members of the public because the police will be knocking on your door at various times. I will not tell you the times, but we'll be knocking on your door and telling you, hey, we have a search warrant and we'll be coming to check, we're looking for this and we will find it if it's there. For me, again, it's engaging the community and building confidence where we can develop a solid informant program where people are comfortable with calling the station and providing them with information on crime. I think everybody has a part to play. So we need to develop the culture, and the only way you could develop that is by the public having the confidence that you're going to respond to their call, or you're going to respond to the information, and that you're going to keep the identity safe. So that is some of the training that I've been incorporating in the station, where we train persons on how to handle information, manage information, and that there must be a response, not a reaction, because there's a difference between a reaction and a response. So, I've seen, okay, we have gun violence in Vieux-Fort, and then boom, a lot of police, there. But that's a reaction to the gun problem. A response would be a properly assessed, evaluated program of operations where you develop target profiles, you develop the intelligence around your targets, right? You begin to conduct certain level of surveillance, you begin to recruit certain level of informants, and then now you know who exactly you're going for, where you're going for them, and how you're going to get them. So this is some of what I want to incorporate, within our policing district. For me, policing, for there to be successful policing, you must have maritime, aerial, and terrestrial superiority. And I don't want to go into the details of that, but you must control your roads, control your waters, control your airspace. And this is what I intend on implementing in Soufriere, a system where we have full control of our roads, our maritime borders, and our aerial systems. So I will not go into details of how I intend on doing that, but those are some of the areas I believe that will give us the competitive advantage in terms of being able to respond effectively and efficiently against the criminals that we will be targeting.
Thank you so much. It is now 9 minutes after the hour of 11 a.m. in Surface and Lucia, and of course the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. Let me say thank you so much for joining me here today, Wednesday, the 6th of September 2023. This has been our edition of House Guest for today. It's been a pleasure to be your host, Cabrina Ephinane. Thank you so much, Kimroy Rene, for joining me here, to our audience as well. Not forgetting your facilitation and input. Thank you so much. Do have a blessed and productive day. We out. Thank you once again.
Thank you, everyone.